Hi, Oliver.
Hi.
Okay, first of all, a control room round of applause from the class behind the glass because Oliver literally moved mountains to be here this morning.
It's a total pleasure.
Okay, so Oliver was on stage in Cambridge last night at 9 p.m. What was going on there, Oliver? How was it for you?
It was the Cambridge Literature Festival, and it was I was talking about this book on stage, and it was all great, although 9 p.m. is getting a bit past my bedtime. So,
Anyhow, without having to get a train back to London.
Exactly.
To come and see us, Herberts. And are you back home today?
Yeah.
Back up to Yorkshire?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Oliver used to live in Brooklyn?
That's right, yeah.
In New York. And you moved back here because of the pandemic or around the pandemic? Or
It was around then.
Pandemic-y?
We didn't think that was why we were doing it, but then we realised we were just another data point of people moving from the city to the country, which was like huge numbers of people were doing it exactly the same time.
How's it working out for you being back in Yorkshire?
I love it. It's more remote than I've ever lived anywhere. Not super remote, but compared to Brooklyn, certainly.
Yeah.
And I do kind of.
Do you live on a hill? Did we talk about that before?
I do basically live on a hill. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is an accurate description.
And how's it affected your writing?
That's an interesting question. I feel like, just getting to walk around a lot in beautiful scenery is very helpful because actually most of my writing gets done in my head while I'm walking along.
Oh, that's nice.
So it's good to have some good places to walk. And there's sort of fewer distractions because there's a bit of a lower intensity to sort of daily life. I think that's a good thing, but it's not necessarily an easy thing because it's quite useful to have those sort of total distractions in the city context. It enables you to sort of not focus on things you probably should be focusing on.
Yeah, because you can stress test things, but you can de-stress test things, which is sort of what you're doing with your life. Because your lots of books you have written, and once again you say you've written this book for yourself, they're the best books. The me-search books are better than the research books. The we-search books are best of all, and we're all part of this research. You've reflected on your life a lot, and Tim Ferriss, 4-hour work week, 4,000 weeks, this is how long we've got left to live. Do you want to put a number on it? Does it help? Does it not help? Is it productive? Is it counterproductive? And so you moving in, we know that one's environment has the biggest effect on your life because you can do yoga for 90 minutes, but you can't be in yoga for 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So wherever you go, however you exist, with whom you exist around has a massive effect on life. So I just thought that would be quite interesting to ask you that.
Yeah, no, it's true. And also the people, right? The people, it's more when there are sort of, when there's a lower density of population, it sort of matters more how you're getting on with people.
Yeah, of course.
Like it sort of is important, and you sort of realise that you have to pay some attention to how you're being.
Less transience.
Yeah.
And does that become more transactional or less transactional? I don't know. Covertly, it might be more transactional, mightn't it? I suppose.
I think there's bits of both. You have to be aware that you're going to be dealing with the same people ongoingly. So certain care is required.
There's a book there somewhere, isn't there?
Yeah, I think so.
And also
probably.
the great danger is, isn't it, as a creator, that you become so genuinely fulfilled by your day-to-day existence. You think the muse may be on the next train home.
Could be. I don't feel like my sort of anxiety and neuroses and screw-ups are going to be completely eliminated anytime soon.
Yeah. Good. Thank God for that. So we've got more Burkeman books to look forward to. It's funny because, often we get people on the show who I really like and really respect, and we have a great time interviewing, and we love their films. Their films do well, hopefully, because they're on the show, and their books, etc., etc., etc. But they do drop in the odd phrase like, well, times have never been tougher. And you think, well, that's a pretty general phrase. Well, the world's never been better. That's a pretty general phrase. I'm not sure I agree with either of those statements. My jury's not out on those, to be honest. But I think what I can agree with, and I love this book, and I loved it from the get-go, maybe because of the fact that you say the one thing we can't dispute is that we have never lived in more anxious times. And now I'm on board. I'm going, that's what all these people mean when they come on the show and they say these general phrases which aren't quite right because they haven't thought of it. But there's the Ice Age, the Bronze Age, there's the Anxious Age, and we are bang in the middle of it, aren't we?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, that's a feeling, right? So it doesn't necessarily need to match up to material conditions or what the threats are. But I think part of it is actually because we feel like we ought to have, through technology and all the rest of it, we ought to have like the control that we've been seeking. If this was medieval times, you wouldn't expect that in the first place, right? So it's that expectation of control and then realizing that, oh no, we're actually finite and human and don't know what's going on.
We just have more evidence to prove that we cannot control anything at all. We have more devices that still can't control things. So actually, we're proving the point that we're trying to overcome. More and more.
Absolutely. I think that's right.
Love it. Tell us about the magic of the impossible.
One of the things that I'm really trying to get at in this book is the idea that we spend a lot of our time and drive ourselves crazy, basically trying to find some sort of exception to the terms and conditions of being human, right? We have limited time, limited control over how that time unfolds, limited ability to know what's coming in the future or even to understand other people. And we're sort of constantly trying to do things that make us not feel like that's the case. So all sorts of productivity and self-help advice, I think, is kind of covertly trying to keep us in that fantasy that one day I'm going to sort it all out, be on top of it all, know what's going on.
I'll be happy when.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And my argument essentially is that it's vastly more relieving, but also more like actually productive and empowering to see that that is completely off the table, to sort of let that crash and stand in the wreckage and say, okay, I'm always going to have too much to do. I'm never going to feel like I know exactly what I'm doing or like I'm certain about what the future holds. And because I can sort of stop chasing that now, that's exactly when I can actually spend some time in the present doing things that I really care about.
So there is freedom in the impossible.
There's freedom in seeing that things are impossible that we try to pretend aren't.
Do you think some of us pretend things aren't impossible because, or are we pretending that we're pretending because the things that are possible, there is no built-in excuse for failure. So we go for the impossible subconsciously or consciously, knowing that if we fail, we can fail and everyone will understand because it was impossible. As an excuse not to do the possible.
Yeah, that is interesting. I think that's a really interesting way of putting it. I think that there's this kind of secret payoff to the feeling that your real life hasn't quite started yet, that you're en route to getting everything sorted out or finally understanding how to do your job or be a parent or be a spouse or whatever it is. Because as long as you haven't got there, as long as there's still this big thing in you that needs fixing, it's like, yeah, I don't quite have to show up fully. I can't be blamed if I'm not doing it very well right now because I'm still on this project of future me. Yeah.
I'm sanding the double garage door is what I'm doing. I haven't finished doing it. You talk about look, there are 28 great chapters in this book. This book is a beautiful read. It's almost parabolesque because it's so simply written. It's so simple to read because it's so cleverly written. How much editing goes into this book, just these kind of books? Is it massive?
Oh, I completely rely on my editors. I mean, I like to think that what I produce the first time round has got some meat in it, but then it really goes through a serious process of editing,
sort of the physical dimensions and the magnitudes and the actual physical mass of this book is testament to the message in it, I think. And the chapters, they're over 28 days. I presume that you probably said, look, 4,000 weeks is a massive hit. You've got to get the word 4 and weeks on the front cover. So you've done it, haven't you? 4 weeks to embrace your limitations and make time for what counts.
Wasn't quite the story. Tell you what, I brought that idea. The reason that 4 weeks thing matters to me is because it's like long enough to, I think that you might, and for it to be enough time for change to happen. But it's also short enough that when you begin, like you can see the other end of it. It's not like saying a year to change your life, which like whoever does that.
It's a 5K as opposed to an ultra,
right?
Something like
that.
There you go. It's again, it's an advert for the book. And what's great about your book is it keeps feeding in on itself. It's fantastic. So you talk about finishing. There's a chapter on finishing. Why is it good to finish things?
I think that there's a kind of amazing, really quite mysterious power in taking something that you're working on or that has been bugging you, whatever, in your personal life, right? Yeah, and bringing it to completion. Part of the reason that, again, the sort of hidden reason that I think we don't do that and love to have like 25 open loops in life is because we can go into detail on this, but the short version is like, I think it's a sort of makes you feel like you don't have to die, right? Because as long as you've got all these open loops,
so true.
Life, like you're going to be around to finish them. So as long as they're not finished, that means you're going to be around.
I have stuff to do.
And if you can bring yourself instead to take one thing, like bring it metaphorically into your, onto your plate in front of you and do it and complete it. You'd think it would be exhausting, right, to actually finish things, but it's the opposite. It releases energy for the next thing. Because
it's chronic, isn't it? The unfinished business is a chronic thing. And if you have lots of things that are unfinished, as most of us do, cumulatively, they are more exhausting than if they're individual. And over time, times that by 1,000. One of my favourite questions is, how heavy is a glass of water? Answer, depends how long you hold it for. Because it will end up being the heaviest thing in the world. Yeah. And that's chronic-ish. That's a chronic pain for you, isn't it? That's chronic exhaustion for you there and then.
Completely. And if you think about a small task like, fixing a door hinge or paying a bill that you haven't been getting around to, and you actually count all the time that it occurs to you, or you think about it as the time that it takes to do these tasks, suddenly take like hours and hours because we're reminding ourselves of them and giving them mental bandwidth.
And when you get round to it, you can literally hear fanfares in your head, can't you? You this is because you talk about a done list as opposed to a to-do list. We call that a to-da list. So, ta-da!
Excellent.
I've done it. And that's your done list, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what the great thing about, I think that your done list is a bit similar to Netflix.
Why so?
Right. So if you come up with the best show ever on ITV, right, you'll get a viewer rating, okay? And if it's a series, it'll probably go down from episode 1. It might go up if it maintains an audience, whatever. Strictly, for example. So Strictly was on 13 million. It's just launched a new series on 5.6. Most channels would kill for 5.6 million, but clearly it's down 8 million. Mm-hmm. You watch it, a Netflix show comes on, gets 10 viewers week 1, but it stays on. So the viewing figures go up to 20, go up to 30, go up to 40, go up to 50. A to-do list is a list that gets shorter. A to-done list is a list that gets longer. Mm-hmm. Your to-done list is the Netflix compared to ITV's to-do list.
I like it, yeah. And of course, the to-do list only gets shorter in theory. What actually happens is it kind of gets longer and longer with new things that you then have to do.
More to-dos waiting on the subs bench.
Exactly. And I think that idea of a list that's meant to get longer, that records the things you have done, and that encourages you to compare what you've done in the day, not to all the things you could in principle do, which is infinite. Yes. So you're never going to reach a good judgment about yourself by making that comparison, as against comparing what you've done to what you would have done if you'd done nothing at all that day, right? So every single thing you do is extra. I think that is really important.
So we've got 28 days. You can read a chapter a day. I didn't. I love reading your books, so I gobbled this up yesterday afternoon.
I forgive you.
But the 28 days are divided into 4 weeks and 4 sections. What are the 4 sections?
The 4 weeks are called Being Finite, Taking Action, Letting Go, and Showing Up. And they're sort of intended to be in order, right? It's sort of facing the truth, the bucket of iced water over the head of how limited we are in the first week, how to then do bold and important and enjoyable things in that situation. The third week is then very close to my heart in terms of what I need in my life. It's the sort of how often it's important to be able to sort of let things happen instead of make things happen and like unclench a bit.
That
and then
is
it sort
a
of
moment.
Culminates in the fourth week.
That is a moment. Yeah. If you can get to that epiphany where you start to let things happen. And I found that my mechanic in that, my call to action in that, is to just stop starting things, because enough things will start themselves of their own accord. So just be there to witness them starting things. And if you start something, first of all, it's not really meant to be, because you're the catalyst for it. It's square peg in a round hole. Eventually, unless you keep hammering it, and we all get tired of hammering, the peg will pop out of the hole, because the universe will make it pop out of the hole. And if you just witness something else being started by someone else, or a situation or a chain of events, then you are in the audience, and you can join the hypnotist on stage, but you don't have to go on stage every night yourself.
Right. Yeah.
It's just a lovely fit. It's great, isn't it?
Yeah, no,
somebody
absolutely.
Else's bus, somebody else's driving.
Michael Singer, the spiritual teacher, has
I've
this
heard
phrase,
of him.
right? He says, life doesn't need you to help operate it, or reality doesn't need you to help operate it. It's going to be fine, and then anything you choose to do because it feels right is extra. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, out of all the 28 chapters, which one speaks to you most? Because you could be called the Imperfectionist, Oliver Burkeman, the Imperfectionist. If you went on tour, it would be the Imperfectionist, wouldn't it? Tell us about Imperfectionism.
Well, Imperfectionism is sort of my umbrella term for this whole philosophy that says like the reason you're not going to get on top of everything, the reason you're not going to get everything sorted out and feel like you know what you're doing is that isn't what humans get to do, right? Being human just means having too much to do, feeling like you're not ready to do things. And so imperfectionism is the approach that says, so like, let's do stuff anyway now in that finite reality, instead of constantly sort of effectively postponing it to the later time. To your question about the chapter that means the most to me, or I mean all of them, but one of them is the thing about being willing to let things be easy is something that I need to get even better at, right? The idea that you just sort of assume that if something's worth doing, it's going to be difficult and you've got to sort of tense your muscles and expect to suffer. And, you know, life has difficulties, but it also has things that are much easier than we sort of approach them as going to be.
Again, after reading your book last night, I went to bed, woke up this morning, and I thought, what's my priority today? From your book, my priority was to send a text. It's the most important thing I had to do all day, and there are no repercussions from it. It's a very important text. I sent it. It's one of the most important texts I've ever sent in my life.
Wow.
But it was so simple. But it was my main priority today.
Right.
And that's speaking to what you're describing.
Yeah. And now it's done. I take it, and everything else is.
And now I have a new priority.
Everything else is extra. Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Staying off my feet all day because I've got this mad run on Saturday.
Right.
So it's great, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I think it's when you get into it, and it's not easy, ironically, and I'm a work in progress myself, but when you do sort of fall in with the rhythms of reality in that way, it's this sort of amazing thing that you get both the peace of mind and the calm, and you're more effective. You do more stuff anyway than if you'd been fighting.
It's a bit like Aikido, isn't it? Use the force of the other person. It's Wu Wei, isn't it? It's not forcing, because there is enough force out there. You don't need to meet that force or to go against the flow. You know, you can be in flow with flow and just join in almost.
Yeah, and it works way better. The Taoists, you're mentioning some Taoist ideas, they have this lovely phrase about how we usually go about things, which is beating a drum in search of a fugitive, right? We go through life trying so hard to do something that it's going to have exactly the opposite effect. The fugitive is going to hear the drums and run away.
Yeah, and it's like that other thing, isn't it? Sorry,
No,
please.
Sorry, just that basic idea of like the effort can really sometimes get in the way of just letting the thing happen.
Yeah, and also, you know, that phrase, if you walk around with a hammer all day, everything will look like a nail. Otherwise, why have you got the hammer in your hand? You know, which happens a lot on talk radio stations. Not us, others, it has to be said. You also visit another affirmation, which is, you know, or a well-worn phrase, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. And what you're saying is, how about we'll cross that bridge if we come to it? Because we'll cross that bridge when we come to it is foreboding. It's definitely going to happen. The thing is, it might not happen.
Yes, there's sort of two layers to this. Absolutely. There's the fact that we constantly try to cross the bridge before we even get there.
Yeah.
And a lot of worry is basically just this attempt to like think through every single thing that could happen, figure out that you know exactly what you do. And it's like, you never can. So that's why you worry in a sort of repetitive and compulsive way. And then, yeah, absolutely. Half those bridges.
More.
Never.
99.9%.
Right, exactly. Never arrive in the first place. You never get there, and so that's something you can definitely let go of. Firstly, because you're not going to get there. Probably it's not going to happen. But secondly, like even if you do end up facing one of those bridges, when you get to it is the only time that you can actually cross it. Anyway.
Yeah. Talk about Sam Harris now, one of our mutual heroes. I don't actually definitely want to man. You talk about him like you love him. Sam Harris, who is this genius, quantum physicist, philosopher, you name it, he's done it. We've had him on the show. I didn't understand a word he said, if I'm being really honest. My brain completely melted. His good friend Ricky Gervais has a great podcast called Waking Up.
Waking Up is the app that he has.
That's right. It's great. It's great for those who is big fan of Alan Watts. Way, blah blah blah. He can still get caught out, can't he? About being psychologically between rock and hard place by a good friend of his.
Yeah, he tells this amazing story about how he was just at coffee with a friend one day, just like moaning on about all the problems that he was dealing with.
He's a published philosopher.
Yeah, in his business life, I think it was in the example here. And she sort of interrupts him and says, "Hold on a minute, are you still under the impression that you're going to get to the stage of your life where you don't have any problems?" and he recounts how he sort of was brought up short and was like, "Oh yeah, I actually have subconsciously been going through my life, not just kind of annoyed by a given problem, but also with this really strange notion that someday I'm going to get to the point where it's all just plain sailing and I don't have problems anymore. Of course, it's not going to happen. And it makes every problem sort of double, right? Because you've got the problem itself and you've got this kind of voice in you that's like somehow resenting the fact that you have problems. But actually, like, some kind of problems are what give life meaning.
Of course. Has Sam never read The Road Less Travelled? He must have done.
He's being introspective and wise here. He's realising what he's doing.
I know, it's so mad, isn't it? Because even he has to zoom out or have friends zoom him out.
Yeah.
You start off your book with that actual, thought. This is a book about how the world opens up once you realise you're never going to sort your life out. It's about how marvellously productive you become when you give up the grim-faced quest to make yourself more and more productive, and how much easier it gets to do bold and important things once you accept that you'll never get around to more than a handful of them. So it's about which of those you choose to put in the palm of your hand.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what would give us your own advice to yourself for those choices?
Well, first of all, I think choosing what to do, if given that there is this sort of infinity, effectively, of really meaningful and important ways to spend a life or any given hour, first of all, you need to chill out about it, because you just accept that there's going to be millions of things that you don't choose that would have been great things to choose. And then another way of sort of asking the question to sort of choose between a handful of those is this idea from Carl Jung, which I also write about, the idea of a life task, the idea that actually instead of asking what do I want out of my life right now or what will make me happy, you ask sort of what is life asking of me today, right now? Like, what's the demand?
And there will be an answer.
There will be an answer, and it won't necessarily be that you have to do some sort of terrible drudgery or hard work or something miserable. Absolutely, the answer could
usually
be
the opposite.
Right, the answer could be that life is asking you to lighten up or
feel
to
the
chill
fear
out.
and do it anyway, because guess what, you might enjoy it.
Absolutely.
That
Brilliant.
Kind of
Yeah, exactly.
And Carl Jung, I didn't realise that Carl Jung's sort of epiphany was followed a time he had to take off school because he was genuinely, almost medically, allergic to maths.
Yeah. He was terrified of maths. He was outraged that nobody would tell him what a number is. He couldn't work out what numbers are, which I'm not sure I can either, right?
Yeah.
So
We've often tried to come up with the 10 single-digit number, and we can't even think of the name or the design of it, because all numbers are design classics, and we just pass over them on a day. They are, aren't they?
Yeah, no, I love it.
They're absolute design classics. Vassos, go on.
I'm reading your book, honestly. So I read it on a Tuesday, just before running club, and it gave me the same feeling, and you mention it in the book, as the previous Tuesday at running club. And I said to everyone, we're going to have a lovely sunset, it's going to be great, we're going in the park, and it was raining, and I was really resisting the rain because I'd promised everyone a sunset, and and then the rain got biblical and we all got completely soaked, and then there was no resisting the rain because you're completely soaked. And reading your book was exactly the same feeling as that. Oh, it's do you know what, I'm completely soaked and it's fine.
I love it. No, I'm so glad I had that effect, because I think that moment, literally in rainstorms, is such a great metaphor for all of this. It's like the only problem, assuming you don't have some sort of very precious paper documents with you or something, the only problem with getting rained on is the resistance to the idea of being wet, right? It's like as soon as you get past that and you see like, I'm just here in this environment.
And life is the same. Yeah. The problem with life is your resistance to lifing.
Right.
Yeah,
no,
and also,
exactly.
Our fear of dying, because once you're dead, you won't mind because you'll be dead and you won't be able to.
Yes, yeah, also true. Yeah, I think
it's the rain. It's just getting wet. Getting dead is the same thing as getting wet.
Yeah, no, it's all reality. It's all just reality that is here anyway, whether you like it or not.
So you mentioned Sam. You mentioned other ones, other heroes of mine, and then you go. You have to throw Seinfeld in there just to finish me off. I love Jerry Seinfeld. The Seinfeld strategy, the daily-ish as opposed to the daily. I think there's a whole book in ishness. Bring on the ish, embrace the ish.
Oh, I really like that. Yeah,
that's got you written all over it, hasn't it? Ish?
I love it.
Tell us about Seinfeld and daily-ish.
So there's this thing been going around in circles of people who are sort of geekily obsessed with productivity techniques like me, called the Seinfeld strategy, which is allegedly the secret of how he became so prolific as a joke writer. And the basic idea is every single day you do a bit of whatever your creative challenge is or the thing you want to do in your life, in his case, writing jokes, and you mark an X in the calendar. next day you mark another X when you do it, and the idea is you never, ever, ever break the chain. And this is called the Seinfeld strategy. There were hundreds of articles, people made apps so you could do it. And when I got to interview him a few years ago, not really mainly about that, but I took the opportunity, I asked him like where this had come from and whether he really did that every single day. And he was just completely baffled that anyone would think that was useful information, right? He did not mean, it turned out, he'd just like given it as a throwaway remark to some aspiring comic at a comedy club years previously. He didn't mean have this whole very, very brittle and sort of clenched kind of way of producing your creative work. He just meant if you wanted to get good at something, you got to do it lots of days. Yeah.
But then he embraced it, didn't he? He sort of reverse embraced his own.
Well, I think it's pretty much about it. Right. It's pretty much what he does in his life is show up every day in this kind of, it's athletics in a sense, right? The metaphor is athletics in some way. And I think that what's so powerful about dailyish is that you have this kind of sense that that you should be doing something pretty much every day, but that is very, very far from saying that you need to sort of feel terrible if you miss one day, right? The idea of dailyish is it's pressure and it's discipline, but it's not a counterproductive, perfectionistic kind
and then some ne'er-do-wells that commercially they encourage streaks, don't they? You've got to do this every day, otherwise you feel terrible about yourself. It's not worth feeling terrible about yourself, so you must do it every day, and by the way, you're paying us money whilst you're doing it. That's all wrong. That's why dailyish and Seinfeld is always right. Gabrielle says, I used to share a mantra, I will not get it all done, which I used in my thinking management versus time management courses. Such resistance from many, but it's so true. Claire from Cirencester, love this. Oliver Burkeman, he's a genius, just what I needed to hear today. I say to my kids, we will cross that bridge when we get to it. I'm going to change it if we get to it. Now, so many pearls of wisdom. Book is ordered. Come on. That's why you're here.
I'm very glad to hear it.
It's great, though, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's great. And you know the thing about life, Oliver? It's always something.
Yeah, exactly.
Who says that?
That is Gilda Radner, the comedian, and who died very, very young of from a cancer, and who allegedly gave that catchphrase of hers, or even to that most sort of grave and serious development in her life. And I think what's so powerful about that idea, that sort of sardonic idea that like, yeah, there's always another thing to cope with, it's always something, is that it really works against that notion we were talking about of like, okay, soon I'm going to get to the bit where there are no problems. This isn't going to happen. If anything, as one goes through life, the problems get more rather than fewer. And you know, that doesn't make it easy to cope with necessarily. Things can be incredibly painful and awful, and we should be honest and open about that. But you don't need to make it worse by expecting still that like one day you're going to get clear of human problems.
Get up in the morning, load the bases in your favour, embrace the ish, play every day on easy mode, because you can play hard games on easy mode. Why make them even harder for yourself? Oliver, I freaking love you. You're amazing. I really do.
Thank you so much.
This book is so good, everyone. You've got to get into your life. If you haven't read 4,000 Weeks or heard an audiobook, you have to. One of the best books ever written in modern times to help you look after yourself. But this is a pretty good bedfellow. 4 weeks to embrace your limitations and make time for what counts. Oliver Burkeman, thank you so much. Control round of applause. Class behind the glass. Here we go. You would never know, would you? He was in Cambridge 25 minutes ago.